Hey everybody, it's Kate Quinn. Welcome back to Sew Steady Facebook Live on Sundays with Kate. And I'm super excited to be here. And as always, I'm trying to think of good learning objectives when we do something. It's not just that I want to show you a ruler or template, although there's a lot of learning that goes with that. What I want to do is help you expand your own ability to quilt the things that you want to quilt. So let me pull up my sandwich today and show you what I got. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying that this is a work in progress. You know, sometimes when we put that quilt piece up there, we don't know what's going to happen. And we don't know exactly what the design is going to look like. I have a friend of mine who, when she conceptualizes a quilt right at the very beginning, she basically has the whole thing quilted in her mind. I don't. I'm like, okay, let's try this. Oh, a little bit of this. Oh, maybe that. Oh, I don't like that. We're going to go this way. And that is my design process. And so that's what you'll see today. So don't be alarmed if things are not like, do it exactly like this, because most of us don't have the skill to say, we're going to do it exactly this way. So let me show you real quick. I'll scoot the camera out, I think, just a little bit so you can see more of the piece. This is just something that is embroidered, and let me turn it even more so you could see it a little bit more. It's not exactly a square, it's not exactly symmetrical, it's pretty, but it's kind of an odd shape. So what do we do with it? When we have something that doesn't have that really super nice, easy lines that says, here we go, you know, it's sometimes very difficult to decide how we're going to quilt it. And so what I'm going to do today is I'm actually going to define the space, and I'm going to create a boundary that will highlight that and sort of make a frame so that this is really defined. So the first thing that I did in this process is I just put my straight ruler on it, and right here on this edge and on this edge, so the furthest element, whatever that might be, I made a mark that was 1/4 inch away. And you'll see on this side, see how I messed up? It's actually this line out here. So we're going to ignore that one, but I didn't want to get it wet. So those lines are just going to have to wait until later. I've kind of crossed them off. So this is the outer boundary, and this is the outer boundary. And the furthermost limit there is 1/4 inch away from each of those elements, no matter what other things were in there. So this is going to give just a little bit of breathing room on either side. And this becomes our mark to work from. It doesn't mean that we're going to sew on that line, but it means that we have some visual to start spacing any elements from each side. And that is just a visual reference. You'll see as we get a little further that there are other things we have to consider. That might not be exactly where we're going to make our mark if other things happen. Okay, so that's the furthest boundary on this right and left edge. And then I did the same thing on the bottom and on the top. So 1/4 inch away from the bottom and 1/4 inch away from the topmost edge right there. Okay, now right here, this design kind of goes that way. Visually, it's the bottom right here because this would be the horizon where the plant is growing. And I think that makes sense to us visually. That's just random. I don't have to do it that way if I don't want to. But because that is the way it makes sense to me, that is how I'm organizing my design. So it's kind of like a linear thing that goes that way towards the top. Okay? Now, there's only a little bit of space out here. There's more space on the bottom and on the top to do stuff with. This is not as wide and this is wider. So I've organized the design to make better use of whatever space is available. So I want to put a long arc right on this side, and I'm going to use this as the visual reference. So let me show you two things that we want to test when we put it right on here. Again, you can see I messed up the center line too. So it's this line right here that we're using, not the one that's marked off. On this is the 16-inch arc. It's very big and awesome. I love it. Let me show you. One of the things that I like about it is because it is such a big number, This is very long and flat, so I can travel a large distance with this arc. And that's pretty much what we want, because this is kind of a long element right here. We want something that'll go beyond it. So right at this intersection, I'm going to put this on here. And I'll show you. If I lined it up right there at this line, right at the cross mark, it'll sew a 1/4 inch away. And if you look on this side, it's not going to cut into any of the design elements on this side. So ideally, that would be great. I would love to place it right there. Super easy to line everything up. But then let me show you something. When I put it on the other side, let me show you what happened. If I line it up in the same place on the other side, let me turn it and let you see. Right here, if I use this as the alignment right here, this is going to cut into that design right across this part of it. So I don't want that. So what I decided is I'm going to move this up. So this is right there is the intersection right there where it would be touching. So we'll go up 1. And does that clear it? It still doesn't. We'll go up 2. That's the second arc line right here. And right on the straight line. I still do not quite clear it. It would be really tricky right there. It would probably cut right across that. And I don't want it to be that tight. So I'm going to move up 1 more. I'm going to move up 1, 2, 3 lines right on there. And now if you look at it, it's not going to cut into anything. In order to maintain the same symmetry, I'm going to sew it the same on both sides. So I'm going to use that 3rd reference line. And I'm using the design to tell me what it needs. I can't just randomly say, oh, I'm going to do this. I mean, I could cut through that if I want to, but I don't want to. So 1, 2, 3. I'm just going to put a little arrow sticker right there. As I sew today, I do want to explain that I'm going to be using a light colored thread. It's basically a creamy white, and it won't show up really well on this. But what I have done is I've added a 2nd layer of batting. Okay, this top batting is white, and the reason why it's white is because this fabric is white. If I put a yellow fabric right underneath my white sandwich, it's going to look yellow. It's going to make this white look dingy and yellow. So I have a pretty pristine white under there. And then you can see this one is yellow. This one is 100% cotton. It's bleached. And this one is 80-20 blend polyester and cotton. And that's going to help give me a little bit more loft to show off the design for you. So you'll be able to see the shadow of the design even though the thread is white. The reason that it's white is I'm showing you what I would really do. I would not quilt this with red thread or green thread or even gold thread probably, maybe light gold thread. But a lot of times people are asking us to quilt some fabric or block or something like that. And it's hard to show you and make it easy for you to see, but this is the color I would really actually use in this instance. So hopefully that texture will be good and you'll still be able to see. We'll try to make sure that you have a good view and some good lighting as well so we can, show everything. Okay, so let's get started. We said the 3rd line, we've already marked it. So let's go ahead and align it right on one of these sides and we'll start quilting that. So in this, I might have to jump around a little bit if it's not easy to connect the dots wherever I want. So 1, 2, 3, and there's a center line right there. And what I want to do is I kind of want to sew as far as I can because I'm actually going to tilt this and connect all the way to the center line. So for right now, let's just kind of start right here and pick up that bobbin thread. There he is. Just got him. Okay. So my foot is very high right here. I'm actually 2.7 millimeters up, and that's because this is quite a fat sandwich. When you're working with any kind of sandwich like that, you want to make sure that you can move smoothly, right? You should be able to move your sandwich without fighting with it. And if it's snow plowing out in front, then that would be an indication maybe to raise your foot a little bit. So this is a very, very big ruler. Notice that my hand is really wide, okay? And I'm only trying to hold the area where I'm working. I'm not trying to hold back here because nothing is useful back there. We want to hold where we're working. And as I come down here, I'm going to stop about 2 fingers away from the edge. And that is my safety margin. And that's what I typically will do. Okay? I don't like to get right up to the very edge. So I'm going to tip this a little bit because I want to show you how we can advance this arc and still keep it on the same line. Okay? Ooh, I got a lot of thread right here. I'm going to cut that off real quick, get that out of our way. Your spacing gauge is very powerful in helping you to connect this arc nice and smooth as you advance. It can only advance a certain amount, but we're well within it. I mean, we're not doing anything that big. So right here is the stitch line. Maybe you guys can see that pretty well because of the shadow. I'm going to line up the ruler at 1/4 inch, like that. Try to keep it right on that 1/4 inch, and I would check it at least in 2 places, maybe 3, to get that adjustment, right? We want to make sure that we have a nice fit on the arc so that we can continue that line all the way to the boundary right there, to this stop line right there. So let's go ahead and we'll do that. We'll go all the way down to the line. Okay, and I'm actually just going to stitch back to where we were, right there. And then I'm going to reset this right on that center line and try to stitch right back up because we want to go to the other side. Because this thread is very fine, it's 100 weight silk, I'm okay with adding a little bit more. So double stitching isn't going to be a problem. This will let me make that line really defined. So let me just show you what you can see. You really can see that puff right here with the edge, and this is going to be a nice, really pretty definition for this space. So again, we'll do the same thing. And we'll go ahead and we're going to come out to here. And what I'll do is I'll try to double stitch this area a little bit first and then come back down so we don't have to come all the way back to the center. Right here, this is a very large ruler. If my throat right here was touching so that I couldn't move this anymore, what you can do is just gently lift your foot just a little bit to release pressure and just pivot the sandwich slightly like that. So now this will not touch the edge of your throat. My machine is pretty large, so it does have a lot of room. But if you didn't, that would be a way that you could make sure you have enough space. So we'll double this up. And again, this is a very, very lightweight thread. So don't ever feel like you can't put a couple layers of it in there. Even 2 or 3 layers, it's not going to look that bulky. It's going to look fine. Okay? So again, let's tidy us up and get right to that edge. Keep the very edge of your spacing gauge flush. And here we'll just double that up and get us right down to the bottom to that straight line. And make sure we have enough stitching right here. And we'll go back. What's the purpose of putting that extra stitching in? It's allowing me to travel in a continuous way. So right now I can line up this side right here. This is already marked with my spacing gauge and my stitching line discs so that I know where I want to stop right there. And I'm pretty much right at that exact spot. So I can line this up and get myself over to that center position. Okay? So let's go ahead and we'll do that. Looks like I might be slightly off, but I don't think it'll be enough to notice. So we'll just go with it here. We'll keep it nice and smooth right down to the end. Okay. And right here, I want to put something in before I go back this way. I want to put a little piece right here. So let's do that now before we leave that area, because otherwise we will have difficulty getting back to it. So the template that I want to use is, let's see, hiding. Where did I put it? That one, there we go. This is the Spin E Fex 11. And I'm just going to put right on the straight line, and then I'm going to put one on each side. So let's use the tape, and we'll take this off. Why am I doing this? When I'm going to create a channel with these arcs, I'm actually going to make a wide channel so that there'll be something that we can fill in. But what would happen down here is it would be difficult if we're going this way for one and this way for another to connect this dot. So by putting a little element right here in the middle, I'm making it so that those pieces will never touch. So that was an intentional idea to just make it easier to connect those two sides. And that'll make more sense once you see it. I mean, I can talk about it all day long, but I think the visual impact is what you need in order to explain it better. All right, let's get...
So you had a question if you had a...
Yeah, go ahead. I have time for a question. What's the question?
So Linda wants to know, why wouldn't you start closer to the edge of the arc to begin with, so you wouldn't have to go back and forth more than twice?
Linda, that's a great question. I could go ahead and I could use my stitching line disc and I could mark the corner and I could just sew all the way around. But I didn't. So I only marked it here just to see where the end would be. And so if you wanted to mark all the way around, then you have the ability to do that. What happened down here is this alignment is the center of the ruler. This is where we marked it, and it doesn't reach all the way down. So I have to reposition it no matter what. So if I don't have a stitching line disc mark, I would have to reposition it to fill that edge. And then that meant that we were double stitching, so I just went ahead and double stitched a little bit more. But you could absolutely mark off the whole space and then just use your stitching line disc, your spacing gauge, and go around, and then you wouldn't have any backtracking. So the reason that backtracking also is useful for this particular design is we do have double batting, and we want to really compress where the line of stitching is. So by going over it a few times, we're making sure that this is all the way compressed really, really well. And you'll see that because the shadow of the line, if you look at it, see how much puff we get with that? So sometimes with these really lightweight threads, this is helping create more tension on the sandwich, and it's worth doing that. But it's not required. You can absolutely do it just how you were saying, where you could start down at the corner. For this arc, I would mark the entire thing if I was going to do that. I would use the stitching line disc and mark the whole channel, and then just start at the corner and sew all the way around using your spacing gauge. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll put this in. And the reason I chose this particular design, let me show you. I'm using the design to inspire. This is that shape. It's very similar to this. It's kind of this wide look right here that fans out a little bit, and then it gets narrow as it comes down. So when I was trying to think of something that would have some sympathy for this design, I kind of felt like this shape is reminiscent of these pieces. That's not required. It's just an idea. You can use it, or you can use something totally different. Okay, so when we get down here, we're going to put this right down on the end and just pull that right down into the nose of this. I'm going to do the first one right here in the center, and then I'll do one on each side, and I'll use some kind of random rule. But what that does is that is splitting the channel so that we don't have to connect the two edges, that whatever happens on those edges can just disappear into infinity or underneath, and we don't have to make them match. So again, Linda, I'm going to just comment because of what you asked. Let me show you real quick what this looks like with just a single line of stitching, and then we'll do a second line on top of it exactly and see if you notice the difference. Okay, so this is just a single line, and there's only one layer of thread right here. I'm going to stitch it again because it's easy to do, and then we'll just see what the difference is. So just pop it in there, line it up the same, and we're just going to go over it one more time. I think when I started out quilting, I was very much afraid of double stitching or doubling up my stitching for any reason, and you shouldn't be afraid. It's going to look great. So now we don't have any lines right there, so we can just make a reference, whatever we want. We can make this right here be a 1/4 inch away from the center line, and I think that's what I'll use. That's easy. It's a random rule, but it makes sense, and it doesn't push this design out that far. So right there from the center, or you could even do this right here if you want to. Either way, you're just making a random choice to space these evenly. And then when I turn it the other way, we're just going to do it the same. So right there in the middle, we'll use our 1/2 inch spacing gauge, and we'll double this up as well. So right there, just go right again. We're just following the edge of the template. I have my tape right around the puzzle piece. So I'm just going to comment on that right here. You want the tape right near where the edge of the foot is going to be. We don't want to tape way out here. We don't care if this is flexing. We really care if this is flexing. Okay, so we used our 1/2 inch spacing gauge, so we'll do the same on this side. That's going to keep it symmetrical right in the middle. And then we'll just do one more. So the size on this is the Spin E Fex number 11 at 5.5 inches. Okay, and I can use any size. Why did I choose this one? Because this one is fitting in the amount of fabric that I have in this area. If I had a bigger gap where I had more fabric hanging down, I could use a bigger one. So I'm going to take it off and I'll show you what it looks like now with the difference with that double stitching. And we've got kind of this cute little flourish right there. And that does give you more of a puff because it makes sure that there's no gaps where the fabric is picking up. So Judy, I see your question. Judy Heinman is asking if I'm using a 100-weight thread on the top, what am I using in the bobbin? What I'm using in the bobbin today is 80-weight deco bob, but I would not hesitate to use the silk also. This is just pre-wound and it's the perfect color. This is about the same color as my top thread. So just for convenience, I just grabbed these because then I didn't have to wind a bobbin because I was lazy. So that's a good question though, but I would not hesitate to use my silk in the bobbin also. Not a problem at all. The back on this is very busy, so we're not trying to make everything look perfect because you won't even see it on the back. So now that we've done this, we want to go back and finish the arc on the other side. So I'll just put the key back in and set this aside for the moment. And let's turn it so you guys can see, right? So can you see that what we're doing is sort of creating some unifying entity right here to highlight this, and we're actually making sort of a frame because we're going to put another part of this arc that will make a channel right here, and then it'll just stop right when it gets to this element there, and then we'll fill that in with something else. So one of the neat things about the arc family, this family of templates, is that I can work on the outside or the inside. So I'm just going to show you right here what it looks like if we're working on the outside. This side of the arc and this side of the arc will stitch exactly the same, but they don't look the same, and that's because one is an inside curve and one is an outside curve. So I'm just going to scoot this just a little bit so that I can get my spacing right there, and I'll just go a little bit since I fudged this one. Oh, darn it. Bonbon time, right? I just went a little crazy. Let me check again, make sure that I'm doing well here. So a few stitches just to make sure that I'm in the line, and looks like I'm not, so let's get there. There we go. slippy sliding around today. I need to get in my line, right? So I'm not there. I'm a little bit outside of it. So I'm just going to make that correction right there. Hopefully this will make it easier. When I space it at the 1/2 inch, I just can't do it from that side. I don't know why it's being ornery, but we'll use this side. Okay. Right here, make sure it's right against the foot. It was trying to pop up. I don't know if you guys could see that. It was doing this. So that is something that when you have a really thick batting, you really need to watch for that. You need to make sure that you have compression right near the foot because the batting itself tends to push that up a little bit. So I'm going to hold this with 2 hands right here to kind of get me going because it is thicker. And then I'll hold back here and I'm going to check this spacing just to bring me right in a little bit. Okay, now right from this position, I'm going to do 2 things. I'm going to line this back up right on that center position right there. And I'm going to get myself down a little further and then I'll connect it down at the bottom. So again, we're going to use that double stitching right there. And then I'll come back and just put a little bit more stitching on it. Okay, and now we'll go ahead and connect right here with that spacing gauge. At this point, it doesn't matter if we're on the rest of that 1/4 inch arc on the back or not, a 1/4 inch back here. It just matters that we touch right here because now the design is already aligned with this position. So it doesn't matter what's happening behind. All that matters is that we touch right there. So again, this is kind of big. So I'll hold it with 2 hands because we're going to kind of go back and forth a little bit to get that extra stitching in there. And we'll come right into the center position. Okay, so I'm right at the center there. And now we would want to do that same thing that we did on the other side. And we'll put the same design in with that Spin E Fex number 11.
There's a couple of questions on why are you using the 1/4 or why would you use the 1/2 inch spacing gauge on the inside curve?
I'll show you. Let's go back to that real quick. If this is the curve right here and I'm on this inner side like this, right? The foot is a 1/4 inch away right there, okay? And then if we're on this side and the foot is inside this channel because it's the inside, if the foot is here, we need space for the entire foot. Let me grab something so I can show you what I mean. Right there. Okay. So this is the foot, right? We don't need a 1/4 inch away from the needle on this side. We need room for the entire foot. So it has to be a 1/2 inch because the foot itself is a 1/2 inch. So if we're on this side, the foot becomes the spacer right there, right? We're not worried about where the needle is. We have to make room for the entire foot. Well, if our foot is here and we have that 1/2 inch spacing, right? Then where is the needle in this instance? The needle's in the center of the foot, which is a 1/4 inch away from this existing stitch line, right? So that's why it's different from one side to the other. Here, all we have to do is the needle is already in the line here, right? So then over here, we're making more room on this other side. Oh, no, I think you're right. Did I mess up? I did mess up. You're totally right. Who was that?
It was a series of questions.
Why would you? Okay, you guys, you caught me. I'm wrong. The first person who got it, I'm going to go back through the feed and I'll be checking in with you so that you can, I'll send you something cool. Good idea, you guys. I messed up. I love it that you guys are so smart and you caught it. That's why it wasn't working, right? That's why I couldn't make it work. I'm so crazy. Okay, let's go ahead and we'll put this piece down in at the end, and then I'll show you how we're going to do the channel. Okay, so pull him all the way down, and we're just using that center line. He's not on there, so we may want to mark that in a little bit before we put our tape on. We really need that center position because that's what we marked all of the other ones off of. All right, there we go. Put that on. No forgetting your tape. Keep that tape on there. We don't want this to be wiggling or wobbling when we're sewing. So I'm aligned right on the center line there. Let's go ahead and we'll double stitch that in. On this particular design, let me show you right here, we are outside curve. This is kind of going around the outside. So make sure that you're hugging right there when you go around. I think it's easy to fly off the edge right there if you're not really attempting to hug as you're going around. Okay, so needles in the correct place. We use the 1/2 inch spacer right there. So then we echoed it. You can see he wanted to pop up there, and that's the function of that excess batting. That double batting does really pop that up. So you can see I'm going to keep my finger right there to make sure that that puzzle piece doesn't go awry. Okay, and then let's do this side. Same thing with our 1/2 inch right there. Right on the edge of your fabric like this, sometimes it's a little difficult for it to move. Now we have these channel splitters on both ends now, and what we want to do is we got to come up a little ways and decide where we're going to align. So let's go ahead and we'll just sew up a little ways on this since it's already in position. And then we can decide if we need to move up some more. All right, and I'll turn it so you guys can see what we've got so far because we've done a lot of the outline work to set the stage for this. Okay, we got the center piece, and what we're going to do now is make a channel that is essentially an echo of this. So we can decide how wide that we want it, and we might have to come further out, just depends on what we want as far as alignment. So we want a little bit of room. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 maybe. 5 spaces, give or take. So let's see if we can get one more. One more puts us pretty close to the foot position, so I think we'll do that. So right here, there's a little gap. So I'm just going to come back right on the stitch line until the foot is touching right there. Okay, so right there I'm touching. And let me show you what it looks like. And I'm going to put those arrow stickers on too because I know myself, I will lose track of where I am, of what line that I'm using. So we're using this line right there. And follow it around and this line right there. Okay, so now we can just sew across. We're just trying to create a channel. And then what I want to do is I really want it to be the same right here at the top. So I'm just going to move it around a little bit because it is wider now, so it's changing a little bit. So we are kind of like 1/4 of the way. And right when we get to the center, we'll change it again. And we'll do basically 1/4 of the way again. So getting on that same line. Right here, I'm looking at the arrow, and I can see it's a little bit wider there. And it's okay. I know it's going to be not a perfect oval, but it's still going to create the channel that we can work with. The reason that it won't be perfectly symmetrical is ultimately when it gets to be bigger than 16 inches, then it won't be a perfect circle anymore because this is now bigger than a 16-inch arc. So we're kind of fudging it to make it work. Okay, so I'm right there at that position, and I'm going to sew down to the bottom and back up on this side. If you don't feel comfortable sewing down, you can go ahead and put the template back on and use that as a guide. I think that stitching over existing stitching is a really powerful skill, and if you can do it, then you should try it. So right here, we're kind of at the bottom of the arc, so that's what I'm going to aim for. By arc, I mean this where it wings out right here. This is sort of at the bottom right there. And then we'll put the ruler on and we can adjust the position from there. So there's our channel that we've got right here. And it's not quite 2 inches, I think. It's a little bit more than 1.5 inches. And we're going to put a feather in there just for fun. Okay. So same thing. I want my 5-inch, my little arrows to line up right there as best they can. We did pretty good. We're actually touching already. Maybe 1 stitch up would allow us to line up better. So right there where this little arrow is. Okay, so we'll go about 1/4 of the distance. This is where we adjusted before. So and if you wanted to double stitch these as well, you should feel free to do that. You could go ahead and do it a little bit as you go, or you can just go ahead and stitch the whole thing over again if you wanted to. So we're going to stitch about to right here, and then we'll make the same adjustment like we did before. Okay. And let's adjust it one more time. And then I'm going to talk about why we need to make these adjustments and show a little bit more what the issue is with these arcs. Okay, when we ended up basically right at the same position, and we'll start sewing from right there. This 16 arc is a 16-inch circle. Like if you sewed this and you aligned it and you rotated some more, it would sew a 12-inch circle. And the 12-inch arc is the same like that, but this is just a little tiny piece of the 12-inch arc. The 12-inch arc is actually quite a bit bigger. Let me grab mine so I can compare. Okay, this is the equivalent 12-inch arc. Let's go ahead and bring the camera out just a little bit so we can show you. Okay. So when we have this 12-inch arc, you see that all of these lines are the same distance apart, even way out here. The reason for that is that this is only a small piece of your 12-inch arc. So essentially these arcs are parallel. What happens with these is that these are parallel for a certain distance, but then when you cut this off like a clamshell, if you are getting to the widest part of your circle, like this, right? If this is the arc, this is the widest part of this circle, right? And after the widest part, what happens is if you continue the circle, it's going to get narrower and narrower, just like this. See how this gets narrower? And what's happening with these arcs is once you pass the midpoint, the 12-inch diameter of your circle, then these start to get narrower as they go around. And that's why you'll see on these that these lines out on the edge are closer together, because now this is past the point of the half circle and the circle is starting to retract again and get narrower. So when you're playing with these designs, you can always make something smaller than 12 inches with this and you'll be able to do parallel arcs. But once you get bigger than that 12-inch diameter, you'll have to fudge, or you'll have to use a bigger arc, like a 13 or 14, whatever, something that's bigger than this, right? And that's the same thing with this 16, and this is larger. You can see that these look similar to a 1/4 inch, but you can see they're still getting a little narrower. That's why we rotated the arc in order to try to keep our distance a little bit consistent. So let me just turn it a little bit. It's not perfect, but you can see that instead of it grading in and getting shallower, we have about the same distance for our channel. Okay, and what we've got then on the end is this really cute split in our channel, which I think is kind of pretty and fancy, like a little picture frame on the bottom. And then when we start our feather, we can just pretend that wherever he ends is just going underneath and continuing that way. Okay, so let's get the feather out and we'll start putting that in. And we're going to decide what size feather that we want. I don't know what size. The size is dependent essentially on what the channel can tolerate, how big it can be. So let's go ahead and come in a little bit more. So I hope that was, yes, Kelly, I didn't double stitch, you're right. I can go back and do it if I want to. If I need to travel, I can go back and put this in later. But right now, we just wanted to kind of move along. So I did show that, and it's your option. You can do it or not. So, all right, so I've got a couple of different sizes. I've got my stable tape grips, and I've got some arrows. They may or may not be useful in this particular case. We'll either move them if we need arrows, and if we don't, then we'll just ignore it. So let's go ahead and talk about the size. I want to be able to make this essentially fit on here in this way, and we can actually stop right at the middle, or we could start at the middle and go down to this. So I think what I want to do is I'm just going to make this, let's go this way, kind of like that. So I don't think this is a good first feather. If we're going to use the inside as the spine, we should be on the inside. So let's kind of come down a little bit and get ourselves down to the bottom. And we'll use this position on both sides as the start marker for our feathers. Okay? I think this is a good size, and here's how I can tell. If I turn this a little bit, I can get a 1/4 inch. I have to at least have a 1/4 inch right there. Let me get my spacing gauge out so you can see it too. And I'll actually mark this right here just so you can see the alignment. This is the edge of the arc right there. Okay? When I put this on, I want the feather to mostly fill it up as much as possible. Right now, I'm having to push this down a little bit in order to get this to fit, to be less than a 1/4. So let's try the 3 inch and see if that's going to fit a little bit better. I don't want to have to push it down quite so much. I want to get as much of the feather in it as I can. Okay, so that actually fits really well. Most of the feather is actually in the channel. There's not much hanging off back here. And I'm going to make this opening right here touch this line all the way around. And what that'll give us is just a little bit of breathing room between the feather and the outside frame. Okay, so let's go ahead. We'll start stitching that in, and I'm going to tip it a little bit because I want a partial feather right there. If you want it to be the same on the other side, you can even measure it. We'll use a 1/4 inch just because we can. So I'll be able to sew this, put the feather in until I touch, and I'm going to come back to about 1/4 inch right here from the top of the arc. The reason that I'm doing that is I want to arc up to the next one. If I'm already at the top of the design, then I can't go up any further. So I want the feather to be able to curve up a little bit. So right here, it's touching, and right here at the back, I have to have a 1/4 inch right there on this side of this arc right here. If I don't, I will never be able to come back to the spine. So I have 2 things I'm looking for. I'm on the stitch line here, and I have a 1/4 inch gap on this side right here. Now, I'll just keep going. Touch the spine and back to the top. And if I want to double these, go ahead. If you want to do that nice double stitching, go ahead. So same thing, I'm just pulling it forward. I may need to rotate it slightly, but I'm looking for the 1/4 inch right there, and I need to pull this forward so that my ruler's touching, and this opening is touching the stitch line. So let's go ahead and we'll just stitch those in. We'll do a few of these. And I think I will double stitch. We have one that isn't at the beginning, and we'll just use that for comparison. Okay, so pulling it forward, we're touching, and we have a 1/4 inch on this side. So as long as I keep that 1/4 inch, my relationship here in the channel should stay pretty much the same because I'm rotating it around so that I get that 1/4 inch right there. As long as I have that, I'm following the arc of the channel, and it's going to be nice and pretty, and the feathers are going to lay over exactly how they're supposed to. So back to this position, and then advance. Each one, checking this opening each time. And if you're not sure, you can use your spacing gauge. It's an easy way to make sure you have the right amount of space. But if you feel like you can eyeball it, I think we all get a little better at that over time, especially since we've been sewing a lot and we probably have the calibrated 1/4 inch eyeball. Okay, so that would be something you can use. That'll just make it a little faster. And you'll see with this thread, it's really easy to do that double stitching. It looks good. It really creates that great definition. Let's see if I can see my stitch line now. Make sure that I go down to my stitch line, not to my markings there. Okay. So this does take a little time to sew. We got a big channel. So let me kind of turn it a little bit. And we'll do maybe to the middle, and then I'll go ahead and just take it off so you can kind of see how it looks. Get all the way down to your spine, make sure you close it, and then come back. So I could even put a little arrow there that's kind of giving me that visual marker, looking for your 1/4 inch on that side. So while we're stitching this, I'll go ahead, I'm going to talk about something else. So the double batting, the function of it is to really create a lot of depth of texture. When you quilt it down and you have bi-level areas of texture where it's heavy or light, because we have the double batting, we're going to get a bigger shadow. More loft equals more shading when we have thicker quilting or less quilting. And so that's why I have this on here with the white, because I feel like you'll be able to see that texture much more since we have just such a low volume thread color. Also, when I put this sandwich together, I went ahead and I quilted around the embroidery design a little bit. That was also basting, but what it does is it kind of stabilized everything. So I went ahead and I used my ruler foot, but I actually quilted around these freehand as best I could. And so there is tacking on the inside of this and on this side and all the way around. That is a little bit more challenging. Rulers can help you do that, but it's also good if you practice doing that, because the only way to get better at that kind of freehand stitching is to do it. You know, we don't send our kids to the tennis championship and they haven't practiced one bit, right? Or to the swim championships and they've never been in the pool. We have to make sure we take time to develop that skill and try not to avoid it, because you can't get better at it if you never do it. So anytime that you have the ability to trace something or stitch back over something, then that is something that can really help you make sure that you can do the skills when you need them, okay? So if you have some kind of, area where you can practice that isn't important, then go ahead and practice in that situation. And then when you have a quilt like this where you just really need to outline, then you'll be able to do it. So we'll just keep going. Notice that my machine has a nice even sound. There is no stitch regulator on this machine, it's just me. I'm trying to sound like the machine does when I'm piecing. So nice and even rhythm with my foot. And this is a movement that I feel comfortable doing. When I listen to my machine, I don't feel anxious. It's really actually very relaxing for me, because this is the pace that I can easily, capably sew. If your machine is going too fast for you, I think that's when we get a lot of anxiety, because we try to keep up with it. We try to sew really fast because the machine's going really fast. But if it sounds nice and relaxing. It doesn't promote anxiety, which helps make the stitching easier for you, better for you. So I am tap dancing a little bit. We're getting towards the other side. And here's the challenge. What do we do when we get to this far side? So what I want to do is make sure that we show you this. We only have this much more to go. We won't do both sides. But I want to show you that we split the channel for a reason. If I was trying to go around, I could do all these and I could go around the corner, but it might be a little bit challenging for some people. And I think that by separating the channel and creating a break in it, we're making it easier because we don't have anything that has to match. We can just basically fill the feathers as much as we can, and then we'll just stop when we're on that side. So I'm still using the same reference here. I'm aligned right on the stitch line, and down there at the back, I want to make sure I have a 1/4 inch so that I can touch the spine. And that's going to keep me rolling right around that same space and following the arc nicely. So it's going to look really pretty as we get back to the beginning. So just a couple more. Thanks for bearing with me as we stitch around this. I'm going to check in with Honey real quick so maybe we can answer some questions if there are any.
So I think you kind of addressed, there was a little discussion about is the embroidery all the way through the quilt or not, but you...
It isn't. Yes, that's a good question.
Why you went around and framed it.
Yes. So the embroidery did have a couple layers of batting. This is pretty dense embroidery. And if you're going to quilt with embroidery, you need to make sure that whatever batting, stabilizer that you're using, that you can quilt through this. So this had some woven, stretchy, like a knit kind of a stabilizer, and it also had paper stabilizer. And I had to end up going through and taking out a lot of that paper stabilizer because it was very heavy, and it would be difficult to quilt through this if I left that in there. So I took the time and I removed that. So this is what we're getting so far. Let me show you how pretty it looks. So you get a lot of deep shadow here. This is the double stitching. And then this one right here, this one doesn't. This is just the single right here as we went around, and then it was doubled on the top, and this is doubled all the way. And you can see there is a notable difference right there between those two. It makes a big difference in this instance, especially with that double batting. So if your thread is really thin, you got plenty of opportunity. Just go ahead, do some more. More thread is good, okay? So let's go ahead and let's connect this part at the top. Let's see. Touching right here with the plastic, a 1/4 inch opening right here at the back. I'm going to put my, did I set it down? I set down my spacing gauge somewhere. Now I have all these tools up here, so now I can't find anything. Is it under there? I don't know. Oh, way back there. Oh, okay, thanks. I had to reach for it. So right here, when we line it up, push the ruler here down so that it is touching the stitched line, the line that's the outer part of the channel. And then here on this side, what we're looking for is that 1/4 inch right there so we can get back into the spine. It could be bigger than a 1/4 inch, but it cannot be less. It has to be minimum a 1/4 inch. So right here, we are almost right with our next element right here. We're almost touching this. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and align it as if I were stitching the next one. So right here, I want to touch the channel with the opening, and I still need this 1/4 inch on this side right there. So tip it if necessary. And I'm not just going to sew it. I'm going to sew to the existing stitch line right there with our Spin E Fex 11. So now I'm in that channel. I'm leaving this in place, and here's why. I'm going to sew down until I touch right along the existing stitch line, and now the ruler is touching, and I'm going to finish the feather element down to the spine right there, and now I'm done. If I didn't put this little flourish in here at the bottom, which is the bottom of this feather, then this looks really wide and it doesn't look as pretty. It looks like you skipped something or missed a step. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just tack off. And I can do two things. We started here and we put this one on the bottom. What I can do to create the motion keeping going around is I can put a little starter on this side and just go that way. And then it would look like we go all the way around. Or I can come back to here and I can go that way, which means that the feathers will go in the opposite direction. So those are just decisions that you could make. I would do the other channel the exact same way, but if I start over there, it's going to come around like this as an oval, like it'll go loop-de-loop. But if I use this as the bottom and I do the channel that way, then the feathers will go opposite directions and they'll meet up at the top and they'll kind of flare out. So they'll be opposite. Those are just two different options for you. I won't go ahead and stitch those at this moment, but I just wanted to show you this. Now we're going to talk a little bit about some elements right in here. And this would not be enough quilting to leave this alone, right? This space right here is way too big to leave this alone. If we were not capable of just stitching around all of this like I did, another thing that you could do is we could take a little element right here and we can put something in there just to tack different areas right there. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out my between the lines circles and I'm going to talk about how I decided what size that I would want to use. And we're going to put little circles in there. Can I give you this, honey? Can you put these back in the bag? Thanks. Okay, so, and here's one more, baby. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to put this on my lanyard, right? Because otherwise he's going to run away. Stick him on there. Don't let him go away. So the little circles that are on here, this is about 1 inch right here. And our thread isn't really going to show very much. You can see it a little bit. But I'm going to make this little item just stand out by just quilting a little circle right around him. So let me get it right here. 1 inch circle. Okay, so this is my between the lines circle. One of the challenges that we'll have with this is we don't really have any channel to line this up. So really I have to do it visually. I'm going to try to put this with that little icon right in the center and just sew it. And just like we did before, I'm going to double stitch it a few times, tack it off, and then just hopscotch to the next one. Okay, so right here, we can just lift up our needle. We can cut our threads, but we don't really need to in this instance because we're literally just going to start going around. And I would do all of these that are the same size. Try to do all of those first, and then you could trim all your threads and then come back in with a different size. That eliminates having to take the tape on and off. We could just hopscotch over to all the ones that are the same size. Okay, so let's do that. Let's put this on there. So you can see, I know he's gonna fit. There's more than a 1/4 inch of space, but I can't use the 1/2 inch because it won't fit. He's about 3/4 of an inch. So right now, just put it on there and try to make it as centered as you can. Okay? And what I thought would be, this would be a nice way to create a little puff behind this element. So that's going to give a little bit of quilting detail that will be really unique for those little areas and make them highlighted, but not be too much of a show with a different color. Okay, so double tack and then slow down, just tack it off. Okay, pick up our needle and we'll just lift up the foot. This is going to release the pressure so that we can move over to the next one. So right there, right here, it's going to be a little tight on that side. So I'm going to show you an idea that you can do. I'm still trying to center it, but there is a stitch line right here on that green. I actually stitched right along the leaf. So rather than cut through it and sew some random circle, I'm going to align the needle right in the existing stitch line. Right back there, there's a little piece of thread. I'm going to cut him so he'll stay out of the way. Right there. Just kind of push him out of the way. And I'm going to sew around this so that I can get that circle. So, and we'll go back the other way so we don't cut through him, because we don't want to go on this outside area. And right here in that stitch line, the existing line, I'll tack it and then just pick up my needle. The next closest one is this one right here. Again, line it up, try to get it right in the middle. And you can actually lower the foot right there and test, can I get the design in any of these? So like right there, it's really close to the red, so I'll just scoot it a little bit so that I can clear the red, I think. Oh, we just cleared it. Okay, good. We're going with it. Just barely. So I can make those adjustments whenever I need to. Remember that you're in charge. It's your design. Nobody's going to say, oh, you missed it or whatever. They won't. I doubt it. People don't do that. Some people do. But don't point to it when you sew it. I'm stuck on something real quick. Let me get this thread off of here. Oh, he cut my tape and he's right in between my puzzle piece. All right, I'm going to cut that off, get that out of there. Let's see what we got. Make sure that we're not stuck on anything. I'm going to go ahead and bring that thread up because I don't want to sew through it. Let's just make sure we can cut that. So there's the bobbin right there. I'll just clip him, get him cut. That way we won't have all these long tails. For some reason I have a really long thread there hanging out. So we'll cut that. So now you can kind of see that we're starting to get just a little bit of texture. And I'm going to pick it up real quick. I want to show you the thread color a little bit. So when I chose the thread color, you can see that this is a little bit buttery, a little bit yellow. And I did that because both of these have a little bit of that gold tone. So if that stitching does show out, I thought that it would blend better with a little bit of a more yellowish tone, but it still is very, very white. And now we have some quilting tacking in those areas. That one, I didn't do a good job. I may rip that and try to center that a little bit better. That's pretty far off. So visually, I don't like it, but you know, it's up to you. You guys can leave it or not. And then let me show you one more thing. So I would go back and I would do all of these little guys. I think I could still get the circle in there. This would be a partial right up against the stitch because he's almost touching right there. So this would come right out from the leaf like that. So right here, these ones are bigger. This one, he's not, let me show you. Let me see if I got my 1.5. This is the, let's see what size, 1.5. So this is the 1.5. If I put that on there, he's kind of big, I think, but if I go down 1/4 inch, you may be able to put your echo ring on and see if you can get a better fit. You would have to try that. So let's grab it and we'll just kind of see what that looks like. The echo ring is going to take up 1/4 of an inch, right, on the one side. So the difference between the 1.5 and the 1 is a 1/2 inch spacing. This might allow us to get a little closer circle on there. And the way that you could find out is just go ahead and you're going to put it on first, push that echo ring down, and then you want to wiggle it a little bit until it's up. Before you sew anything, lower your foot and make sure that you can move without any obstruction. Make sure that this is not hanging down below the foot. And that's how you'll know that it is properly positioned. So let's lift it up and let's just put it inside here. And I'll center this visually. And now I can go around it. And I do not think that I can sew this around without cutting into that little guy. So even though this size is a little bit bigger than I would want, I don't really have a good perfect measure for whatever size this is. So he's going to have just a little bit bigger space around him than maybe the other one would. And that's okay. You know, that's how you can test it and you can say, yes, this works or no, it doesn't, before you actually ever have to stitch anything. So I'm going to try to line him up, 1 finger space, 1 finger space, 1 finger space, and then the foot is about that same distance on the other side. So let's pick up our bobbin thread and we'll stitch it. So again, you know, trying to think about, I could have put maybe some like little spin effects around this, but in this particular case, these designs are very small, and I did not want to stitch into the embroidery. I wanted to let the embroidery stand on its own, and that's why I made the decision to put these little circles in there instead, because they essentially will be a little frame around those embroidery elements, and they'll be really emphasizing the shape that's already there. Okay. So let's go back real quick. I'm just going to reiterate kind of what the goal was of this lesson, what the learning objective was. If you have an area or a quilt that does not have a well-defined space, you can make a space, and you can make it however you want. If I had this frame be smaller, I could make it weave into this design. I could make the arc stop at the leaf and start on the other side of the leaf. And this would just be an interruption, just like this is an interruption. So it's not that I couldn't have made this a little tighter, but because this was a lot longer like this, I wanted to create a little more romance on it and a little bit more of an elegant frame that kind of suited this embroidery. And so those were some of the design decisions that I made that kind of worked with that. And I wanted to maximize what I could of this fabric. So what will happen out here is I've got a lot of open space. So I'm probably going to put in some kind of piano keys or maybe some curvy lines that will contrast. And since this kind of is going this direction, I would probably want my lines to go this way. So they would come out like this. That'll emphasize the linear nature right here of the design that we've chosen from the base. Then also, I've got these little circles right here. So I can either micro quilt inside the circle around this, or I can do some quilting in here around it. I've already outlined all of the leaves and the petals, so they will stay puffed up because they have a little outline around them. I'll even show you. Let's see if we can get in there. So you see that? So this is actually outlined and then hooked over, and I could put some microfill in here, and I can actually make a bigger echo here, which will still emphasize this space. So this is going to be essentially a combination of ruler work and free motion. But I always like the ruler work to be mostly done at the beginning because to me it creates the framework to put all the free motion in. If this embroidery was just here and this was all just plain white quilting space, there's no organization, and I feel like my mind just goes all over the place. But now I have a really specific frame, and I know I want some quilting outside the frame, some quilting inside the frame, and then maybe some micro quilting here that emphasizes the design. Now I have a plan of attack for this. I've created some divisions, some layers that will now help me organize the rest of my quilting so that I can create something unique and beautiful. So let's see. Judy asks, do the bottom and top of the embroidery space need to be quilted? Yes, I think so. I think it does. This is right there. That's about 3 to 4 fingers right here of space all in here. Now, maybe we could put a little mini Spin E Fex right here in the bottom, and we can use that as part of the frame so we can create integration on the inside and the outside. So that's an idea. You could put maybe a little chain of pearls on the inside right around here. You could create another frame, and that frame could be interrupted by elements in the embroidery design. But yes, I think this is probably not enough quilting. You can see how puffy this is, and what we want is we want more. Another idea is if you can't quilt around the embroidery design on something like this, Something that's really easy and that you could do with this really, really lightweight thread is you could crosshatch this and you could go right through the designs and crosshatch it in both directions. This thread is so fine. Let me see if I can show you an example of where I crossed over. Right there. So right there you can see this is the white thread and there's the leaf. And when I crossed over, nobody's really going to see that. It's pretty micro. I mean, that's really tiny. But if I use this really lightweight thread and I did a cross hatching right through all of this, nobody would see it. And it's okay if you want to go over your embroidery. There's no rule that says you can't do that. You should totally feel like that is your call. And maybe just stitch one line through your embroidery as a test. And if you don't like it, then it's only one line. You rip it out. And if you do like it, then just quilt the tar out of it. Let's see. Yeah, some more feathers would definitely be good. I could definitely do more random kind of feathers to fill in some of these. But what I don't want is I don't want like a super tight right here and now there's more space. So I want something that's going to balance in between here with this outer edge. So that's just something that I'll be thinking about as I'm developing my design. So Dee said she likes the idea of setting off the design in a simple manner along with the quilting at the same time. Oh, great. I'm glad that you enjoyed that. And that's something that you can do. And it's not that you have to make this frame, but it's that concept of segmenting your design. Sometimes when you have so much blank space and so much white or so much background fabric, it's hard to know where to start. So if you put a shape on there, you have already started. It could be a diamond. It could be a curvy diamond. Like if this is the middle, we could have done an arc that curves in or an arc that curves out to the center. Yeah, Linda, I absolutely plan to do some echo design around these flowers for sure. And we could even do more circles. We could echo these out and make the circles stop. Like we could echo these ones and then we put the bigger one on, he'll be stopping at the other ones, right? So like if we had two circles right here and then we put this one on, he would clip at the boundary of the other circle. So that's another idea. There's so many ideas, and I think that's our biggest challenge as quilters, is there are too many ideas, right? So what I think is really helpful to get you started is if you have a lot of space and you can't think about something, put a circle, put a square, put a diamond, put a rectangle, put something on there and frame it and then split it up. And that way you can start having a little smaller space to engage in with the design, and that would really help to open that up. And then you don't have like 20 or 30 inches of quilting space. You just have smaller place to think about. So yeah, and I think pebbles, pebbles always look good. They're good. Create like a little dimension, like big and little, vary the scale, and then, get in close to your quilting design. And I think this could be echoed really well with this. You could come out and you could echo this again, and that would segment things even more and create smaller fill spaces for you. So can you scroll back, honey, a little bit so we can just see if there's more questions? Mary Gallagher, she had some good ideas. She's like, oh, I would leave it. So I'm thinking maybe since the last thing we did was this, Mary would say what we could do is we could make the other circle begin here but be wider, and that will actually create some dimension that sort of pushes this that way. So I'll kind of just chalk that in so you could see what I mean. We can start the stitch line where we are right there, and you could make this one just flange out like this and touch into the existing design. That would be a little bit more work, but you kind of get the idea where he's offset and it would push the design that way. So yeah, agreed. I don't know. I don't like ripping, so I think Mary has a good idea. You can always turn something that isn't working perfectly into whatever. Like we can take this design and we can do it down here, then it looks more intentional. That was Mary's comment. She's saying do it again, right? That's what I'm getting. So anyway, you guys, we're at 4:15. It's a little bit of a shorter day today. If you have any last comments, can you put it in right now? I will reiterate, I saw somebody questioning the batting, so I'll flip it real quick. It's 2 layers of batting, and here's the backing. You can see it's really busy. Let me flip it too. I'll show you the back, right? We have a couple of crisscross threads, but this is the back so far. See, it's not really going to show. Even with the double stitching, you can see the circle a little bit and you can see the frame. But this was all the single stitching that I did to outline, right? And it's not going to show very much, right? So we don't care. We're not worried about that. This is not something I'm trying to make this back look so pristine because it's going to be in a show and they're going to flip it over. I just like the front. The embroidery is the star, and when I have this piece showing, it's because that embroidery is my front element. This is what we want people to look at. So I'm not worried about the quilting looking super precise. It doesn't look ugly, but it doesn't look perfect on the back because that thread is going to vanish in there anyway. So, okay, well, thank you guys so much. There's only a little bit of feathers in here, Betty. You didn't miss much. There's just a little feathers, but really talking about how to make the design be more emphasized, and especially if you have something that's a little bit of an odd shape, how you can work with it. So definitely you can mix your embroidery. I think embroidery and quilting look amazing, and you should definitely mix them up together. So have a great day, you guys, and I will see you next week, and happy quilting. Quilt the tar out of it. That's my motto. Quilt some more. Okay. Have a great day, you guys. Bye-bye.